trying some new format for this conference. The idea is to have what we call a roundtable about editing technologies. So we have a panel of three implementers of editing technologies. We will ask them to present themselves and their product and the history of the product. And then we will try to grab questions from the room. So please try to use whatever things, but probably the most interesting thing is to use Twitter, because we use it as the new IRC, so let's do it this way. So in order to capture the questions, and so we can just try to summarize them, in this format. So first, I want to make a small introduction on editing technologies, and then I will ask each people to present themselves in 3 minutes, and then I will ask some questions for which they will give answers. The first point I wanted to notice is you might have seen that the two last presentations, which were also by two guys that are there, were about editing technologies. This is one of the main, focus for which customers are interested in and are looking for new solutions and trying to ask the XML community as a whole to give them solutions for which they just don't see any angle bracket at all. Of course, for us it's a bit painful, but we try to find a solution for them anyway. And it's very also question, since Lim told us that Oever editor was already one of the answers in the HTML world more than 15 or 20 years.
1987.
27, thank you.
1987.
1987. So 23 years. Okay, thank you. So yeah, so it's not very new question, but probably we will have some new way to answer this, or some new axis of research or development for which we can gather new effort in this direction. So I will now start by asking, our fellow from agenceXML to present something that you may have heard about. It's a tool which is called XSLT forms, but I will let him introduce himself.
Hello. So my name is Alain Couthures. The product I will show you is XSLT forms. Okay. Full screen. That's it. So XForms 1.1 is now a recommendation. It's rich recommendation. I can focus on 2 points. First, bindings, because it's the key point for XForms. You can use XPath expressions. So it's very elaborated and very, very powerful. Another point is about events and actions. You can do also very, very interesting things. So you can have some sort of instructions in your XML document. Got it? So the principle for XSLT forms, it's first of all an XSLT 1.0 transformation, and that's all. It's a way to compile an XForm document into HTML and Ajax. That's all. So you have 3 main files: the product, an XSL file, and JS and CSS. It can be performed at browser side or at server side. So, of course, XSLT Forms is a good candidate for the XRX architecture because you just have to use it at browser side, then at server side use XML database, query and so on, and REST interface in between. XSLT Forms can work with Firefox, Internet Explorer, Opera, Safari, Chrome, everywhere where there is an XSLT 1.0 engine and JavaScript. All are very standard now, so it works. XSLT Forms is now embedded with Spark Project Server and XSDB. Well, now it's a worldwide known project. You can see a lot of methods. And to conclude this short presentation, I add that there is a community with XSLT Forms. Well, users, contributors, users becoming contributors, and well, just friends. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Again, I'm Lawrence from Xopus. Also have a short presentation, very short, and hopefully a short demo followed by that. Our tool is about non-technical authors. I stressed that before. Our tool is also browser-based, like ours, runs in Firefox and IE. And our goal is XML for everyone, like you see here. The challenge that we have, and sorry about this. There you go. People have total freedom to create any kind of document, which makes them happy, but may not be what you want. Because it leads to inconsistent documents. And, well, they may have had a nice time, but you certainly don't. So we need structure. Lots of structure. Control. Very good. But they'll probably fight you when you try to do this. So you can try to fit people to the technology, which is what often happens. But our goal is to change the technology to fit it to the people. To have something that fits them in a very nice way. For that, we created our browser-based editor. It has important features. It's what you see is what you get. So you edit in the XSLT output, the way the content is published on a website typically, but also for legal documents or other kinds of content. There's even a company here in the room called Autonomy who use it to build applications. Very interesting technology. Browser-based, easy to reach a large crowd. So it's basically the ideal tool to capture information from a large group of authors. So the ideal way to move XML to the future and not keep it in a tight close, a small room like we are right now. Thank you.
My name is George Bina, and I'm one of the founders of Syncro Soft. And Mohamed said to tell you more about the company than the product, because probably most of you know already the product. We had a dream when we were young to get and create a company. And we are students, and it was again, we didn't imagine at that time that we'll do anything, that will go to a lot of universities to work with, or it started like a game, and it happened to use XML in 1998 for different projects. XML just started, I read that specification, I didn't understand anything, I read it again a few times. What should I do with this? Because the project had used XML for these files. What is that? And then after we started to work on rather advanced things. We worked on dialog applications and the speech recognition. And at some moment in 2001, when it was that drawback when a lot of companies had problems, we started to think to create something that belongs to us, not work, for different projects, for other companies. And we got something easy that looked very, very easy compared with what we did before. And we started to work on Oxygen, and a few months in April 2002 we had the first release. And Oxygen started, and a lot of years was only a tool for developers, for working with the raw XML, with the source, only in the source, to support the schema languages, the XSLT, the technologies around that. A few years ago we added also the visual editing support, so it's really young in Oxygen, but we already are at the same level. Even I would say that some features are even more advanced than in products that developed since 10 or I don't know, maybe 20 years in some cases. And another thing that we like and we do in Oxygen is we try to support the latest technologies. We try to include the latest engines all the time. So to keep the product as much as possible up to date with the latest trends, with the latest technologies.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it was just a short introduction to give you some spirit. People show different points in the presentation. I retain 3 different points. Freedom was one of them. So to freedom for the users, freedom for you developers to be able to develop a new product and to go to the new technology, probably because some existing product was not sufficiently fast, adopting the standards that are every day coming, recommendations and stuff like that. And I saw also some limitation, around the limitation. I want to ask you a question about, well, not digging into technical question, just about use cases. Have you, for your users, dropped any feature that, for example, user tell you, yes, I need this, I need this, I need this. Is there a very significant feature that you had to drop because of anything? The standard was not mature, or the technology was too difficult, or something probably for you that you have a product that is so there for many years, a product that you had to drop a few years ago and start again after. So just cool around here.
Well, I should say that about X-forms volume might be a big problem, because there are data, there are many controls. Well, rendering in just a browser, it can be a problem. I can show, for instance, feature. Okay. Well, for instance, we try many things to control, to calculate and so on. So yeah, there may be a limitation about that.
Things that we have not built. I've said it today a few times that we're focused on non-technical authors, but in reality there's no such thing as technical authors and non-technical authors. There's a gray area. In every community with authors, we have a few people that are a bit more skilled than the others, and they come to us to request features that are more in the area of the skilled technical author. And we tend to not build those. An example is, for instance, the ability to position the cursor at every valid XML location. At the end, inside a paragraph, between paragraphs. That's confusing for a lot of authors. It does help power users to exactly position where they want the element to go. But instead we decided we will not do that because it will confuse the majority of our author group, and we will just write intelligent code that will find out where the element should go. And another thing that we have not built is what Lien brought up earlier, go from one valid state to another through an invalid state. From the start, our tool was only about valid documents, impossible to create an invalid document. And there have been use cases where people wanted to create an invalid document because it's easy, you can load invalid documents and then make them valid later on. We've decided not to do that. Instead, again, writing a lot of code to not have to do that and make sure that people got where they came from. Not all of them, but most of them.
We postponed one feature in Oxygen, and that is a visual mapper for XSLT, for instance. A lot of people are asking for that, but it requires a lot of effort to implement. And I guess each one has his own idea of how that will actually work. And also this area has also software patents around it, so it's we decided to postpone that for later. I will have a comment on what Lauren said earlier, because we do allow invalid states, and because that you are on a path, here is another path. Maybe in many cases the shortest way is to put another step here in this invalid situation and then go back. And if you take document, for instance, it's very hard to create the valid document from the start, because you don't know what the user will put a paragraph or a list inside the section. And RelaxNG has one very interesting feature that allows to check if the document is feasibly valid against the schema. And that means if all it takes for the document to be valid is only by adding content, not deleting. And this is a very useful feature to work with, to enable if you edit documents. For instance, and you do not want to see too many red spots if you have errors as you go.
Yeah, sure. Well, you named an excellent example of a section which has to have a title and a paragraph or a list or a table. And a lot of content models have exactly that problem. So rather than allowing a section with a title and no body, we wrote code that will automatically insert a paragraph because that's 80% of the time. But when you insert a list, it will automatically replace the paragraph that you have. So with solutions like that, we try to, or we prevent invalid content because we do not have.
and then you need to go to in the application and have configuration options. And as I said, in general, for Oxygen, we like to implement features as much generic as possible, and to use the schema instead of putting the user to write for each derivation of that group, or for each data specialization, or for each PI profile different options to set different options in algorithm.
So it seems like the fact that the product is out of the box is one of the main things that is showing up now, versus to what happened, for example, with HTML. For example, if I take outboard text, where we 6 months doing parameter files and stuff like that in order to do that. So you think that editing now needs to rely only on the minimum information, which is the model?
Not only on that, but the editing should provide sufficient support based on that. I mean, you can have specific support for a language if you go and invest effort in that, but you should be able to use a different customization of that, for instance, without going and configuring the application. I don't know, maybe you don't know how to do that. You need to learn that. Maybe it will take you 1 day, 3 days. I don't know. So it should just work based on the schema, because when you create the customization, you already have the schema.
Well, that XML is well designed for, I should say, static structure. If you have a static structure with different levels, which might be somewhere there, somewhere else, it's not that easy, because there are a lot of expressions. So basically, I would say that XML is for static, let's say, corporate structures. And when it's about documents, like documents, well, it's not that easy. That's
for example, in Xforms, you can also have the same kind of problem, saying that you can add this element or this element. So how you do in the interface for the user? How do you do it?
Yes, with submission in Xforms, you can submit even if it's not validated. So it's not a big problem, but well, I have to say that it's not that usual to add elements. Well, anywhere, I would say. They are always added at the same place with a repeat approach. So, yeah.
Going back to the configuration question, topic that we were on, our editor does in fact do require configuration. It does something out of the box, may not be what you want it to be, and you can tweak it into what you want it to be. The reason why we have that is because there's a reason why you have XML. There's an application somewhere that needs that XML in a particular format, and there's a group of people somewhere else who need to create that XML according to your standards. So there's someone with a technical requirement who needs someone else to create XML in our scenario. So we typically have a technical team and a group of authors that are separate from that. We have groups of tens of thousands of authors, and then it's worthwhile to do some configuration for them in order to make the authoring process easier. And because there's a reason for the XML, because the XML has a goal and an application, for that goal and application you can create a configuration for a notebook, for instance, and then reuse that all over again.
Yes, indeed. So it looks like the what we call technical editor is is now something less and less frequent than it was. So people that with business skills need to edit directly the documents. So that's what you're leading to. Okay, great. So I wanted to now to go a little bit further and ask you three, what do you think will be the next thing that you will have to cope with in order to fit the user requirement? I mean, for example, is there a new standard or an emerging standard that needs to be which is very important, for which customers try to push you in this direction, and if yes, which one? We'll start.
We noticed a lot of interest in the new visual editing that we added in Oxygen. And we moved that also as a component, and it works also in the browser as a Java applet right now. So if you configure all you have in the visual editor can be put also in the browser and integrated in a web application. This is what will come next. Other things are to extend the support that we have for XPro, for these new standards. We plan also to improve, like I said, for me, it's really important to have these quick fixes. We have unit test integrated in Oxygen for XSLT, XQuery, for instance. To try to reach, to be at the same level with the Java IDs, what they offer for Java, to be able to offer the same similar functionality for XML development.
The majority of our feature requests are make it faster, more browsers, those kind of improvements. Out of the box configurations for schemas like DIDA, DocBook, and LAM, EPUB, things like that. So we're working on that. What's always important for us, we're a browser-based tool, and out of the box we don't even offer save functionality, which for an editor is kind of important. So upcoming standard for us, which is really important, is CMIS, which allows us to broaden the scope of our product towards having more access to the repository, to offer a user interface for the underlying repository without having to build a custom integration for every system that we integrate with. I think that's our most important step. And another key area that we can continue to improve on is the friendliness of editing. I think we can improve that dramatically even from where we are right now. Looking at programs like Word, there's still a gap in usability between a word processor and the latest and greatest XML editors. Even though you say it's like Word, it is not Word yet. We're getting there.
Well, about the XForms, I would say that they are missing some user-friendly controls. So it means that rich text editor extensions and so on are interesting. Comparing to jQuery and so on, it's not that beautiful, not yet. There is no CSS real extensions and so on. I'm now working at SVG integration also because, yes, it's more and more user-friendly. That's a big point.
That's very interesting because if I summarize, well, you're already on web editors, and you said the next thing is to generate an applet. So to port your application to the web. So it's already working. Okay, great. So this is one of the points. The second point is well, meeting the user requirement is also meeting some standards. You said DILA, Dogbook, and others. I think EPUB, you spoke about EPUB, which is also very interesting. But, well, you also rely on some limitation. Yeah, you just spoke about CSS, SVG, HTML. So what are the technical limitations that are between your product and your goal for the moment? Let's start to be technical now.
Well, what can be done with the JavaScript can be done with XSLT forms. That's a principle. Anyway, because of frameworks, different way to write methods and so on, well, integration is not that easy. Also, for browser side, only XSLT 1.0 can be used. So I will have a demo this evening about Graph to SVG, which is a very nice product written with XSLT 2.0, and then porting it back to XSLT 1.0 is not that easy. Well, browsers are like that today, maybe later, but it's not that very easy. I know both in Firefox XSLT engine, which are not solved for many years.
Yeah, we know of those. We're browser-based tool as well. And those kind of issues are what's holding us back supporting other browsers than IE and Firefox. XML at Google doesn't work very well, it seems. Chrome has some intricacies in their support. Same goes for Safari. Opera does well in standards, but connecting all the dots doesn't really work all the time. So we're dependent on their implementation of a lot of things in order to support other browsers. That said, they make a lot of improvements on JavaScript performance, but still it's a limitation. We do a lot of JavaScript calls, sometimes up to 2.5 million calls or statements just to start, just to render something on the screen. And if you add a large XML file to that, then it can be slow. And every time we fix that, then someone else comes with a bigger file. So it's, we keep doing that. That's probably our biggest challenge. People expect to be able to edit books in a JavaScript application, and we try to help them as best as we can. Yeah, it's still JavaScript, it's still a browser, it's still rather new technology, and yeah, we have to work with what we have.
I took the time to think, but I cannot see a real limitation. I mean, either you put a lot of effort and you implement that, or there are limitations related with some technology and you need to change that. But that, I mean, for instance, we use CSS for rendering in the outer. You cannot do everything right in CSS, but until now we also didn't encounter users asking for something that cannot be done with what we have now. So it's hard to say, to identify limitations. What we will try to do is to look on the interface and try to see how that can be improved as much as possible. And we hope also our users will help us in that. We added a feature that will be available in the new version that allows user to enable collecting usage reports. So it's like you vote for the features that you use. And if you send out those reports to us, we'll see, okay, these features are used, these features are used most. You know, we can have statistics and identify what is used most by the users and focus more on that, on those features. So we hope the users will help us improve the interface for them. And as I said, they vote for the features they are using, basically.
So that's very interesting, but I didn't hear for the moment technologies like XBRL, UBL, and all things that are driving the market to financial and the invoicing and stuff like that. We have plans or ideas about if this is one thing that is driving the market in some direction or not.
About XBRL, I have already done a project about it. Well, I should say that it's not the perfect format for X-Forms because there are a lot of files and so on. But yes, you can edit XBRL with X-Forms. It works. We've not done something with XBRL, but we do see those kinds of applications to emerge. Typically, applications have their own domain. There's legal applications editing legal XML, very to the point. And what we see happen there is that people have additional requirements which their specialized tools cannot meet, and then they go and seek for a more generic tool. So that's not coming, but we don't have a lot of experience with the standards that you just mentioned yet.
As XML, Oxygen users can use any document with Oxygen. As far as I know, XBRL, from what I read and I understood of that, is to be generated from some systems, from accounting systems. I don't think that a user will go over that and change the reports. I mean, I don't consider that a format to support as for editing necessarily. What is important probably for XBRL is to define the different taxonomies that we have for your account, and maybe that is a direction, but probably requires a lot of effort to implement that, and we didn't have user requesting that. So.
Okay, so I should add that Xform can be used to render XBRL instances, especially with the SVG extensions. It might be beautiful.
Okay, so last question before we grab questions, so please start putting them on IRC, Twitter, as you wish. So, what's your relationship with databases in general? I mean, XML or not. You spotted CMS, but CMS is more general. What about all the databases?
Hopefully, Xforms has an MVC architecture. So, we have an instance locally. So it's naturally good for XML databases or anything that can perform treatments with XML data. It's not a problem.
before, we have integrations with many CMS vendors. If you can name one, we have probably an integration with them. Going back to the databases, like I said before, the whole reason for having XML is that it does something for you. That there's an application that can use the structure, and having a native XML database really helps that and really take your functionality to the next level. Allows you to do more with your documents. And we recently delivered an excellent project with MarkLogic, which we're very enthusiastic about, and which is a great match. I want to gather a lot of content and then another one to process it. We have experience with other databases as well, and it depends on what kind of requirements you have, whether it makes sense to go with a native XML database or something more relational.
I see basically two areas for supporting databases. One is on the development part, and another one is on accessing the content using the database as storage for XML. We support basically all the XML databases, Exist, MarkLogic, Camino, Tiger XML, X-Hive, now XDB, all the XML databases for development, and also everything that we edit in Oxygen is a URL, and we even the files, the local files, and we implemented custom Java protocols even for databases, so you can edit any resource from any database exactly as you edit the local files in Oxygen.
So, do we have questions about, in general,
I don't see anything.
real-time problem?
So, in the meantime,
I have a question. Do you see it? Do you see any patterns coming forward for electronic signatures or digitally signing XML documents during the editing process, or non-repudiation and authentication of documents that are being created? Are your users coming to you with requirements in those areas?
We have for several years implemented support for signing and verifying the document. From time to time we have feedback from users, but it's not very significant. I don't know what to expect.
I'm just curious what user patterns you've been seeing in this area. So you're already offering it, but your customers aren't asking you for it or using it very much?
So they have the option to sign the document,
Yep.
and to check that the document is the signature is valid for the document. And we do not have more requests in this area.
Okay.
2 and 2, yes.
Well, neither have we, but because we're typically, or we must be tied into, the question is,
Digital signatures.
yeah, digital signatures. Was thinking about how I would phrase this. Whether we see the need to sign documents and to, that's just in short. Because we're typically closely tied into a content or document management system, their workflow allows people to manage or see who has done what, and the sign-off is something that's dispersed from that, because if it's in a document management system, signing and authentication and all that is typically handled by that system and not on our end.
Okay. So if someone's making a change online through your tool, can you leave breadcrumbs to know who's done that and who's made the change?
Typically, if someone were to make a change to our tool online, if it's a public-facing tool, you have no trace. But if you
Xforms by themselves, but it's not that difficult to implement them also. So, well, we can perform also identification and so on. I should say that maybe Xforms is not yet well in the wild, so it's used in corporate networks, also signatures that, well, request very.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes?
Henry Thompson, University of Edinburgh, Factonomy, W3C. When I built the first free XML editor, which was a long time ago now, it was written in Python isolated, which nobody else does. It was schema driven in that it was both DTD sensitive and it learned productions as you created documents if you didn't give it a DTD. But all it used was parent-child information. No required optional, no sequencing. It was just there to prompt you so that you could use a very restricted number of keystrokes. And that kind of dependency-only grammar is also what John Cowan's tag soup uses to do document cleanup. And I wondered if you'd ever tried that as a sort of intermediary between the bare minimum of just saying, this has got to be XML, it's got to be well formed, that's all we care about, and the full bore, we've got a complete schema here and we're going to enforce it. Because as an author, I found that intermediate stage very helpful.
Okay, so the question is, only a parent-child relation is useful for editing?
Is that's the only thing that the editing tool both prompts from and enforces?
It's useful as an intermediate between no schema and full schema, right? Actually, we also in Oxygen started with learning the structure of the document, and that is also currently as an available action. And if you say learn document structure, it remembers exactly the parent-child relationship, but also the values that you used in the document up to that point for attributes, for instance. And then when you validate the document, when you request validation, it switches back to the schema. So you can switch, basically you can say Ctrl-Shift-L to learn the document structure, switch to this more relaxed mode, and then when you validate, go back to the full schema aware mode.
Thank you.
Well, like I said before, we only allow valid documents, so no. That's a short answer. Reason being that you need a document to be a certain structure. If you need, you can cope with less structure. You shouldn't force your authors to create more structure. There's no need for it. Why punish them and make them let them do something more difficult than needed? So that's one approach. We do have some tools in house around the editor to make configuration easy and to take well, like George said, maybe you should use his tool instead. We have something similar, which we don't sell as a product, but which we use in house. Yeah, we think it's very, very important to enforce the full structure. It may be too restrictive for some trained authors who understand the structure of a mental model of the structure and who know, well, I can do this here, but it doesn't allow me to do it. Then you're not our target audience. We try to build software. People say, I want to insert a title. And our software will figure out where it goes and how to do it and how to keep the document valid. So.
Well, about Xforms, I was talking about rich text editor. So, yeah, you can have such structure, but it's always managed by a control. It's embedded in the instance.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Okay, so I think we are done. So we'll thank our people from the roundtable. Thank you for being so kind and so fresh and give a lot of inside information and very clear, by the way. So thank you very much, and we have